So I'm going to try and do some kind of visioning with PowerPoint. I know that's a kind of contradiction in terms, so visioning with PowerPoint. And also when John said, would you do this session, I thought, what do I need to talk about communities, community groups post-Brexit? And my initial reaction was, what I need is a crystal ball. My second reaction is, you know, what I probably need is one of those things you buy for Christmas, the little figures. You shake it up and there's a kind of snowstorm so you can't see the little figure anymore. Because that's how it kind of feels. Every time you think you've got a glimpse of what's happening, it kind of moves on and you no longer understand it. I should warn you, you need a moving camera for that. But what I want to start, and I'm not making any assumptions about how anybody in this room voted. Yeah? No assumptions whatsoever. I want to say thank you for anyone in the room. You don't have to put up your hand, you don't have to confess, yeah, who voted Brexit. Because for me it's got two great things about it. One of which it brings the possibility of a united Ireland closer together. And secondly, it brings the opportunity of an independent Scotland a bit closer. But equally, there's a kind of no thanks. The kind of permissions to be overtly racist, you know, that come out of Brexit. And the flip side of that, the view that 51% of the population is stupid. That kind of chattering class's view of people who voted Brexit. So those are the two things, the two kind of contexts that make me quite sad about the whole thing. But one of the things that is a kind of an up, is I've sat with community groups all over, I have to say the north of England, so anywhere north of Birmingham. And even 2-3 nights ago, really heated discussion within the group about the implications of Brexit. It's the first time in a long time I can remember any heated political discussion in a community group. And it was not just the one, it's been quite a few. And the second thing I think is potentially positive is that class is back on the agenda. Yeah. Class is back on the agenda in a big way. So maybe a couple of positives. So I want to start this visioning with some notes of caution, but presenting about the future of anything in this thing called the voluntary community sector. Particularly as I'm being recorded, so 10 years' time, so what an idiot. Didn't have to get that bloody wrong, did he? Yeah. There's been lots of predictions about the future. Yeah, so Richard Cross in 1945 talked about the end of charity. Yeah. The great thing about the welfare state is we've got rid of the poor laws. Yeah. We now have no distinction about citizenship, we have no deserving and undeserving poor. I hope, I suspect that Richard Crossman would be spinning in his grave around food banks, but again, I can't really predict what Richard Crossman is doing these days. 2010s are semi-apocalyptic visions of what would happen to the sector. There's cuts, there's austerity, what on earth is going to happen? All these organisations are going to disappear. But it's not a homogeneous sector. Some say it's not a sector at all anymore. So there might be differential impacts on different parts of the sector. And the big question is, what kind of Brexit? Hard Brexit, soft Brexit, no Brexit? We don't know. You can interrupt, by the way. It can become more interactive. And this is a slide to prove that I don't do quantitative research. So the two different questions are actually three different questions. What's the impact on communities? What's the impact on the formal voluntary sector, the larger voluntary organisations? And what's the impact on small community groups? So, yes, never commission you to do quantitative research into any organisation. It's bound to be a failure. I think the official response, when I put official in inverted commas, is actually quite interesting. It's been thought through. If you read statements from NCBO, from voluntary organisations, Network North East, some of the umbrella bodies, The money comes at the bottom of the two-page briefing. The emphasis on charities, this is influencing having a duty to help lead our communities. Okay, you might want to hold on to that statement for discussion later. Similarly, from Stuart Everington, you should consider what you can do to bring communities together. Outreach and inclusivity matter more than ever. Can you remember outreach? Just a thought. And only then the finances takes place. Can we take further cuts? Will it push some of the sector over the edge? But interesting that it's charities talking about bringing communities together. What I want to propose, and this is a kind of typically slimy academic thing to do, just to be told you're talking about Brexit, but actually you're going to talk about other things. And it suggests that Brexit is not a single event, it's part of a much longer journey. It's part of a jigsaw puzzle around what's happening with voluntary community groups at the moment. And it reflects, it's not one-off event in what we're looking at in 2016 is stuff that was happening or predicted in 2008. If anyone remembers the Charity Commission report Stand and Deliver, saying that actually what was happening 8 years ago, 9, 10 years ago, looking at the statistics I used, was the big boys in the sector were getting bigger and the smaller, localised voluntary organisations were getting much, much, much more vulnerable. So that predates 2010. That predates the kind of apocalyptic vision of what's going to happen to the sector. This feels like an undergraduate lecture, so nobody's interrupting me. It's quite frightening. So, as my first note of caution, what kind of Brexit is it? I want to suggest also that some of the impacts on communities depend on location. So one of the kind of surprises, is that word raising the term again, surprise, and there's a question mark after it, was that North of England, by and large, voted out. And people come back, those are the poorest communities that we voted out, and those are the communities that can move money out of Europe. Well, yeah, but how much of that money actually trickled down beyond the RDF money? Big sort of showcase pilot capital projects to communities. It's just a question mark. And I want to suggest it depends much more on location for a very different reason, which is the kind of reinvention of regionalisation. So we're talking about the Northern Powerhouse. We're talking about the West Midlands Combined Authority. And I want to suggest, rather than Brexit, that that kind of partial regionalisation is actually a much bigger factor in some ways. What happens to all those outlying authorities? You might, if you're part of Greater Manchester, have a bit of economic clout. Has anybody been to Blackburn recently? It's bloody closed. Yeah. I'm working in Blackpool. Blackpool, economically is in the middle of nowhere. So what happens to those authorities, those communities, those areas that are outside those economic powerhouses? Stoke-on-Trent, to take an example, in the Midlands. Yeah. And certainly increased economic uncertainty for those communities. And the predictions within the voluntary sector press have been, well, we won't see an impact very soon, but the long-term impact on communities is going to be quite severe. So, I want to put Brexit in a bigger picture. Austerity, I hate to announce, and this is probably kind of a shock, is not going to go away anytime soon. There's going to be further cuts to local authorities' budgets. Business rate review, where London is screaming, or London businesses are screaming about increases in rates, and we'll all have to leave London. Whereas in most places outside London, business rates are going to go down. That's a really good thing. Well, yes, it is, except by 2020 we're going to have self-financing local authorities. Yeah? Main source of income? Business rates. But business rates are going to go down. So not only have you got cuts, you've got to move to self-financing authorities, yeah, with less potential funding base. Huge contribution in the agenda around welfare. I want to suggest that a really strong north-south divide, but that's actually nothing new. I spent the last 6 years working in northern cities wearing a t-shirt that says, "I'm not from London," just to kind of back off the animosity a bit. And that kind of animosity is very real. It's actually really worrying, because there's no poverty in London, which is completely untrue. But that's the image, particularly for people that are not familiar with London. So, continued welfare cuts, and one of the side effects of that is increasing in-work poverty. And I want to suggest a bit that actually has an impact on the small voluntary community group. Okay? But self-financing local authorities by 2020, what are the implications of that going to be? So I'm going to start with the impact on larger voluntary organisations. Well, the figures for 2014 loss of at least £200 million annually. So significant, but maybe slightly insignificant in terms of several billion income estimated by the Civil Society Almanac every year. Indirect losses. Well, we've got quite a few programmes, large programmes, that are jointly EU big lottery funding. Changing Lives being one example, 6 million Stoke Road, 60 million going into Blackpool, almost half of which is EU money, half of which is big lottery money. And I want to suggest that by 2020, if things go the way they're going, Big will have to rebadge and rename itself Bigger. Because it's going to become the welfare state. Just a suggestion. And that's the implications for not all, but some CVSs, councils, voluntary services, who become managing agents of consortia to bid for EU funding. Okay? So there may well be an impact that's kind of trickled down to the smaller local voluntary organisations that are part of those consortia. And a real question whether, if Brexit happens, some CVSs are pretty reliant on the management and overheads that come with that consortium of management. Is it a sustainable business model? What happens when the EU money runs out? And then if you read particularly from any of the legal stuff that's been written about Brexit and all this, you get these little snippets of actually, you might be going to help with the handcart, but there might be a couple of little nice things in the handcart. So less regulation for the sector. Yeah? Some tax breaks, there might be changes some VAT. Yeah? A kind of hope. I can't put it any stronger than hope. Maybe a naive hope, I don't know. That the government will pick up any shortfall that results from the end of the EU funding. But really, if any of you've done it, look on a really, really bright side. You'll never have to do it with the European Social Fund monitoring ever again. Okay? So every cloud has a silver lining. I want to suggest that the impact, unless you're part of one of the kind of co-funded consortia on smaller local voluntary organisations, might actually be pretty limited. How much structural funding, etc., actually trickle down to small local organisations, and how many of those organisations actually have the capacity to bid for EU money? Never mind monitor it. And actually, that trend of the big players getting bigger have actually been pretty predatory in some parts of the sector. That's where the contracts are going. There are fewer contracts out there with local authorities, etc., but they're bigger. So who is in a position to be big? But it is one less possible source of funding at a time when other possible sources of funding. The ending 6 years ago, very best initiatives, also. And community groups, I want to suggest there's no impact whatsoever. Brexit is a complete irrelevance. You can all leave the room now feeling really happy that Brexit is going to have no impact on anything you're doing if you're a small community group. But I want to suggest that there's actually slightly more invidious pictures underneath the kind of headlines. And us versus them. And by that I don't mean the racism I talked about in the beginning. I mean us as small community groups and the big voluntaries. We're not part of their sector. About us. We're not like Oxford. There's beautiful Oxford offices in Oxford. We're not like some of these London-based charities. We're not part of that sector. So very much not that kind of idea there's a kind of continuum between small civil society organisations and big voluntaries who are also parts of the society. But actually not actual animals together. Some groups have just retreated into their core business. We can't take on the big issues. The big issues are just too big. We'll concentrate on managing our estate well. We'll concentrate on running this service as well as we can. We're not going to enter into alliances with others. Something that's really interesting in working with community groups in 2010 was the attempt to try and create some kind of alliances around the cuts, and the impending cuts. I had the pleasure one night of working with Tenants and Residents Association, who is actually taking young people seriously, rather than the usual Tenants and Residents Association response to young people, which is get the buggers off the street. The youth service is going to become, how do we respond to that? How do we work with young people to respond to the youth service? Some, I have to say, take some small community groups and some communities taking on pretty inappropriate roles. Thinking of a group I'm working with at the moment, great advocacy organisation, really stands up for its community, who's got into welfare and housing advice. They know nothing about housing and welfare advice, but they're doing it because we've got a waiting list of 3 months to get an appointment with CAD. So we've got to do this. This is what our community needs. People are putting themselves at risk, never mind the people that are advising their risk. But feeling that pressure. And I'm going to contradict what John said at the beginning. Community development is still out there, but the rhetoric's all about asset-based community development, and that's a kind of depoliticisation of community and a depoliticisation of community work. So that's a particular word. I can see my future disappearing down the drain as I speak. Politicization, I'm talking specifically about that approach to working communities. I think there are elements, and there are some communities that are still highly politicized, but I think the interventions that are being pushed at the moment are you work with communities, but you do it outside the political agenda. So, very practical example. I was going to say resilience, but that's my second least favourite phrase after capacity building, community resilience. We shat on you, but if we make you resilient, we can shit on you more. That's all resilience is. Well-being. If we take an asset-based approach to health and well-being, people will be weller. But actually, the biggest cause of health inequality is poverty. So we don't talk about poverty, we talk about social capital. If only you've got more social capital, you'd be better. So I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying where the discussion about community working development, small community groups is in a depoliticised environment. There's this difference between protest in the UK and protest on the continent in the EU. Parts of the EU, people think protest is good. In England, people think protest is a good day out. So there's a slight difference there. So the kind of multiplier effect for community groups is not just the loss of small grants. The number of small grants has fallen by something like 3/4 in the last decade. So there's substantially less of small grants out there. Yeah? The capacity of volunteers. And by that I just mean the time and resource to do things in the face of ever-increasing demand. I don't think it's any coincidence that in the current environment there's a lot of talk about micro volunteering in the face of pretty overwhelming narcissism. Lots of infrastructure support. A small group that loses a bit of its money, but can then go to the local development agency, the local community councils, develop work and say, any of that information is online, and if anybody's trying to use broadband in rural England, you probably actually manage to get onto the website after the closing date for applications, unless you're prepared for it. The impact again links volunteering, voluntary action, in-work poverty. People who've got 3 jobs. And on top of that, they're trying to do something in their community. Yeah? How long can they sustain that level of activity, that level of energy? And a real loss of low and no-cost spaces, I think that's really having an impact. People's ability to find a safe space to come together, yeah, without having to pay a commercial or commercial rate. And on top of that, we've got Brexit. So just to kind of reinforce the point, Brexit should not be seen as a one-off event. We've got cuts, we've got increasing noises, off-centre and on-centre, around further reductions in the statutory responsibilities of local authorities, right down to very basics like child protection and older people's services. Right? Much longer will those be statutory services? Yeah. Privatisation. If we look at what's happened certainly since 2015, all the big contracts, all the big prime providers are big multinationals. Serco, G4S, the Relation Service, the Work Programme, where voluntary organisations, local voluntary organisations, even national charities, get a look in as this kind of big category. The thing that I want to really stress is what's the impact of self-financing local authorities actually? Issues around political cultures and attitudes. Similarly, the debate around Brexit was poor, but some of the discussions about Brexit post the event have been even poorer. And kind of myth of localisation. We can drive all the decisions down to the highly local level. Well, except for things like high speed 2. If you actually look at the route of high speed 2 and voting patterns along that route, it's really interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Localisation, a strip of Middle England that is opposed to HS2. So the classic example is central planning. I'm going to just finish with some randomly, I shouldn't say random, carefully selected quotes that reflect a much wider synthesis of opinion. But the quote from community activists are not, I don't like what government is doing, but it does seem the communities are now doing more for themselves. They don't have a choice to. From a faith organisation, we need to stop pulling people out of the river and going upstream to see who's pushing them in. So, if that faith organisation doesn't know by now who's pushing them in, I'm a bit worried. In adversity, people come together and actually find the bonds between them. I've experienced that. Now potentially is the time to do that. The danger is that people just think about their own interests in the hard times. Trying to throw out quotes that kind of semi-contradict each other to get the discussion going. Actually, this is for a trust funder, it's just become a lighter for money and a beauty contest. This is a sort I don't want to predict what the future, say in 5 years, will look like for the voluntary, never mind community groups. There may be a leaner but more efficient and effective sector, a more entrepreneurial and business-like sector, or just a leaner one. What we will see played out in some form is a profound change in the relationships between people, government and the sector. Just a kind of quick quiz question. When does that sound? Interview with the development agency, that might be a clue actually. When does that sound? A profound change in the relationship between people, government and the sector. Right, Arvac was founded in 1978, so it wasn't 1978, okay? So it's post-1978. I'm not helping you narrow it down.
Okay? Yesterday?
Yes, I think I know.
97.
97? Pretty close. 2010. Just after the election. A meaner and leaner sector was being played out as a profound change in relationships. And I'm an eternal optimist about community groups. The thing I love about working with community groups is just when you thought you knew every way something could be fucked up, you find a community group that's got a different way of screwing it all up. It's great. You never knew it all when you worked with community groups. And being an eternal optimist, I like Samuel Beckett. And I'm going to finish with two thoughts about joyful keeping Samuel Beckett rather than academic literature. Two kind of epitaphs or catches for community groups. Ever tried, ever failed, never mind, try again, fail better. I'm sure we've all experienced that kind of feeling in our work. And an even better quote, I think, given the circumstances from the unnameable, I can't go on, I'll go on. So to conclude, about Brexit, tout ça change. Just to show that I'm a man of European languages. Your thoughts about this presentation, any questions you have? Your thoughts about Brexit itself, and obviously Brexit plus. And a worry, just to finish with a worry, is looking at material in preparing. Yes, I know people would manage to prepare this. Is what I'm reading is the sector talking about itself to itself.